Supreme Admiral Vextar of the Ziridian Empire stood before the holographic display in his command chamber, his forearms crossed in what he considered a display of supreme authority. The crimson scales along his neck flared with satisfaction as he reviewed the intelligence report floating before him. A pathetic little human settlement on some backwater rock called Kepler 442b, 50,000 inhabitants, maybe less. Mining equipment that looked like it belonged in a museum. No orbital defenses worth mentioning. "My Lord Admiral," Lieutenant Kiselo ventured from behind him, his voice carrying that annoying tremor it always had when he was about to suggest something sensible. "Perhaps we should conduct further reconnaissance of this species before taking action. Our xenobiology department has very limited data on humans." Vextar's laugh rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. "Limited data? Lieutenant, look at these creatures. They're barely evolved from primitive apes. They use chemical propulsion systems, for the Empire's sake. Chemical propulsion. Our ancestors abandoned that technology 3,000 years ago." The hologram shifted to show surveillance footage of the human colony. Workers in environment suits operated massive drilling platforms, while cargo shuttles moved back and forth with all the grace of drunken space whales. To Vextar, it looked like watching insects build a nest. "But sir," Kickswald pressed on, clearly suffering from an overdeveloped sense of self-preservation, "they did manage to establish a colony 17 light-years from their homeworld. That suggests some level of technological capability." "Capability?" Vextar turned to face his aide, all four eyes narrowing to slits. "Lieutenant, I could establish a colony 17 light-years away using nothing but carrier pigeons and sheer willpower. These humans are nothing more than a pest infestation that needs proper extermination." He gestured grandly at the tactical display. "Look at their defensive posture. 3 orbital platforms that couldn't stop a determined mosquito, and what appears to be a single patrol craft that's older than some of the rocks they're mining. This isn't conquest, Keekslow. This is pest control." The lieutenant's scales had shifted to a worried shade of blue-green. "Admiral, perhaps we could simply demand their surrender first? Standard protocol suggests—" "Standard protocol," Vextar interrupted with a dismissive wave, "is for dealing with actual civilizations. These are barely sentient creatures playing with fire. The kindest thing we can do is put them out of their misery quickly." He activated the fleet communications array with a theatrical flourish. "Battle Group 7, this is Supreme Admiral Vextar. You are hereby ordered to proceed to coordinate 77 Alpha 9 and eliminate all human presence on the planet designated Kepler 422b. Complete sterilization protocol. Leave nothing that could contaminate the system further." The response came back crisp and professional. "Acknowledged, Supreme Admiral. Estimated time to completion, 6 standard hours." Vextar nodded with satisfaction. 6 hours to erase an entire species' foothold in this sector. Efficient. I do so love efficient solutions to minor problems. Keekslow made one final attempt at reason. "Sir, what if these humans have allies? What if there are more of them than our initial scans suggest? What if their homeworld takes exception to us wiping out their colony?" The Supreme Admiral's laugh this time was even more condescending. "Lieutenant, you worry too much. Even if their entire species threw everything they had at us, what could they possibly do? Ram us with those adorable little chemical rockets? Throw rocks at our battle cruisers? The Ziridian Empire has conquered 47 star systems. Our fleet could glass entire worlds while having lunch." He turned back to the display, already mentally composing his report to the High Command about this minor cleanup operation. Besides, who's going to miss 50,000 mining ants on a rock nobody cares about? By this time tomorrow, it'll be as if they never existed. Just another footnote in the glorious expansion of Ziridian space. What Supreme Admiral Vextar didn't know, and what Lieutenant Keekslow was too terrified to point out, was that humans had a very particular way of dealing with species who killed their people. They didn't just get angry. They got creative. Director Marcus Stone was having what he considered a perfectly reasonable Tuesday morning when the universe decided to ruin his coffee. The emergency klaxon hadn't even finished its first wail before his aide burst through the door of Earth Defense Command, clutching a data pad like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Sir, we've got a priority alpha communication from the Kepler system," the aide gasped, apparently having sprinted the entire length of the facility. It's not good, sir." Stone didn't look up from his coffee. After 30 years of managing humanity's defense against a galaxy that seemed determined to pick fights with them, he'd developed an almost supernatural calm in the face of catastrophe. Define not good, Peterson. Are we talking, oops, we accidentally started a trade war, not good? Or, someone just poked the bear, not good? The Ziridian Empire just wiped out New Perth colony, sir. Complete orbital bombardment. No survivors. Stone's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. For exactly 3 seconds, the only sound in the room was the gentle hum of the air recycling system. Then he took a long, deliberate sip and set the cup down with the kind of precision that suggested someone was about to have a very bad day. 50,000 people? He asked quietly. 53,417, sir, including the Henderson family reunion that was happening this week. Ah, Stone leaned back in his chair, his expression never changing from mild interest. And do we know why the Ziridians decided to commit what I can only describe as the most spectacularly stupid act of the current millennium? Before Peterson could answer, the office door chimed, and Dr. Luna Vasquez bounced in with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested she found galactic genocide mildly interesting from a scientific perspective. Marcus, did you hear? The Ziridians just validated our entire xenopsychology department's research on catastrophically poor decision-making in hierarchical species. It's fascinating, really. Stone turned to face his chief scientific advisor, a woman who could discuss the heat death of the universe with the same cheerful tone most people reserved for discussing the weather. Luna, please tell me you have some context for why an allegedly intelligent species just decided to commit suicide by human. Oh, it's textbook arrogance syndrome, Luna said, pulling up a holographic display with obvious delight. Classic apex predator mentality combined with insufficient intelligence gathering. They probably saw our chemical propulsion systems and mining equipment and thought, oh look, primitive apes playing with fire. They have absolutely no idea what they just did. Peterson looked between them with growing confusion. Sir, shouldn't we be mobilizing the fleet? Declaring war? Something involving more panic and shouting? Stone stood up slowly, walked to the window overlooking Earth's orbital defense platforms, and watched the massive structures rotate in their eternal dance around the planet. Peterson, how long have humans been preparing for someone to do exactly what the Ziridians just did? Since the Colonial Defense Act of 2387, sir, so about 40 years. And how many contingency plans do we have for this exact scenario? 17 different response protocols, sir, ranging from proportional response to... Peterson paused, checking his datapad. Something called Operation Cosmic Tantrum? Stone's smile was the kind that made insurance companies nervous. Luna, in your professional opinion, what would constitute an appropriate response to the complete annihilation of one of our colonies? Well, Luna said, consulting her own data with the enthusiasm of a child opening birthday presents, according to the Galactic Conventions on Proportional Response, we'd be justified in targeting their military installations, maybe their colonial outposts. But according to human military doctrine, she paused for dramatic effect, we don't do proportional responses, Marcus. We do object lessons. Stone nodded slowly. Peterson, please send a message to Fleet Admiral Park, authorization code Omega 77. Tell her we're implementing Operation Cosmic Tantrum. Full authorization, no restrictions. Peterson's face went pale. Sir, that's the Starkiller protocol. Yes, it is. Stone picked up his coffee again, taking another sip as if he'd just ordered lunch instead of the complete annihilation of an entire star system. The Ziridians wanted to show the galaxy what happens when you mess with inferior species. I think it's time we show the galaxy what happens when you mess with humans. Luna clapped her hands together with delight. Oh, this is going to be such a wonderful learning experience for everyone involved. Well, everyone who survives it anyway. Fleet Admiral Rosa Park was in the middle of her morning crossword puzzle when the order came through. 7 across. Celestial body that provides heat and light. 4 letters. Obviously, star. She filled it in with the same methodical precision she applied to everything else, then glanced at the priority message that had just appeared on her command console. Operation Cosmic Tantrum, full authorization, she read aloud to her bridge crew, her tone suggesting someone had asked her to pick up groceries on the way home. Well, that's unfortunate. For them, I mean. Commander Rebecca Torres, her second in command, looked up from her own station with mild interest. Which system, Admiral? Ziridian Home System. Apparently they decided to practice some percussive diplomacy on New Perth Colony. Park set down her puzzle and cracked her knuckles. Time to remind the galaxy why humans put the over in overkill. Signal the fleet. Full deployment. Battle Group Alpha through Delta, plus the Special Projects Division. All of them, ma'am, Torres asked, though she was already inputting the commands. That's That's a lot of firepower for one star system. Park's smile was the kind that made seasoned warriors consider career changes. Rebecca, when someone kills 50,000 humans, we don't send a proportional response. We send a message that can be seen from the next galaxy over. Besides, I haven't had a chance to field test the new toys from research and development. The bridge hummed to life with the controlled chaos of a fleet preparing for war. Except this wasn't really war, Park reflected. This was more like pest control, but with significantly more dramatic flair and considerably larger explosions. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Commander Singh from the communications station. "We're getting query signals from 17 different species asking if we need assistance with the Zeridian problem." "Tell them thanks, but no thanks," Park replied, settling into her command chair like she was getting comfortable for a movie. "This is going to be a learning experience for everyone, and I don't want anyone else getting in the way of the lesson." The fleet that assembled around Earth's orbital platforms was the kind of thing that made astrophysicists weep with joy and military strategists wake up in cold sweats. 237 ships, ranging from sleek destroyers that could outrun light itself to dreadnoughts the size of small moons. But the real showstopper was the HMS Overkill, humanity's latest experiment in applied theoretical physics. "Chief Engineer Rodriguez," Park called over the comm system, "are you ready to make some poor life choices on behalf of an entire star system?" The response came back in a cheerful Brooklyn accent that somehow made the prospect of stellar engineering sound like a weekend hobby project. "You bet, Admiral. Tommy Boom Boom Rodriguez reporting for duty. I've got the Starkiller device warmed up and ready to violate several fundamental laws of physics." "Excellent. How long until we reach the Zeridian system?" "At maximum fold space velocity about 6 hours, ma'am. Just enough time for me to run final diagnostics on the equipment that should not exist." Park nodded approvingly. Humans had spent the last 40 years preparing for exactly this scenario, ever since they'd first made contact with other species, and realized that the galaxy was full of civilizations that considered genocide a reasonable foreign policy tool. The solution had been typically human, in its elegant simplicity. If someone wanted to play the extinction game, humans would make sure they won it permanently. "Torres, what's our estimated arrival time at optimal firing position?" 6 hours and 14 minutes, Admiral. The Zeridians won't even know we're coming until we're already there." "Perfect. That gives me just enough time to finish my crossword puzzle." Park picked up her pen again and considered 9 down. Complete destruction of one's enemies, hyphenated. She smiled and wrote in overkill. The human fleet accelerated toward the Zeridian home system with the casual inevitability of a natural disaster. Behind them, Earth continued its rotation as if nothing particularly noteworthy was happening, which was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. For humans, the complete annihilation of an entire star system wasn't a momentous occasion requiring speeches and ceremony. It was just Tuesday morning and they had work to do. "Admiral," Singh called out again, "we're intercepting Zeridian military communications. They're actually celebrating the destruction of New Perth Colony, calling it efficient pest control." Park's pen paused over her crossword. "Is that so? Well, I suppose we'll just have to show them what efficient pest control actually looks like. Rodriguez, I want that star ready to go supernova the moment we arrive. No warming up period, no dramatic speeches. Just point-and-click simplicity." "Admiral, nothing says you messed with the wrong species quite like turning someone's son into a really big firework." Supreme Admiral Vextar was enjoying a celebratory glass of fermented Keth juice when the first reports started trickling in. He'd spent the morning reviewing glowing reports from Battle Group 7 about their successful pest control operation. At Kepler 442b, 50,000 humans reduced to radioactive dust in under 6 hours. Efficient, clean, a textbook example of Zeridian military superiority. The first sign that his day was about to take a dramatic turn for the worse came when Lieutenant Kuxalo burst into his private quarters without even bothering to request permission to enter. "Sir, we have a problem," Kiexalo announced, his scales having shifted to that particularly unpleasant shade of yellow-green that indicated severe panic. "Long-range sensors are detecting an approaching fleet. A big one." Vextar set down his drink with the kind of deliberate calm that suggested he was already planning someone's court-martial. "Lieutenant, I specifically ordered that I not be disturbed unless the homeworld was under direct threat. Some minor trade convoy hardly qualifies as—" "Sir, it's not a trade convoy." Kixlow's voice cracked slightly. "It's 237 human warships, and they're moving at velocities that should be physically impossible." For a moment, Vextar's brain simply refused to process this information. "Human warships? Lieutenant, humans use chemical propulsion. They barely qualify as a spacefaring species. Their fastest ships move at a fraction of light speed. That's what we thought, sir. Kixilo activated the holographic display with shaking hands. But these ships are traveling at what appears to be 37 times the speed of light. They'll reach our system in approximately 4 hours. The hologram showed a sensor reading that made Vextar's blood run cold. The human fleet stretched across space like a swarm of metallic locusts, each ship bristling with weapon systems that the Zeridian computer was having trouble categorizing. The largest vessel at the center of the formation was roughly the size of a small moon. "This has to be some kind of sensor malfunction," Vextar said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Humans don't have technology like this. They're primitive. They mine rocks with chemical explosives." "Sir, I've run diagnostics on all sensor arrays 3 times. The readings are accurate." Kixilo pulled up another display. "And sir, we're intercepting their communications. They're calling this Operation Cosmic Tantrum?" Vextar felt his stomach drop into the vicinity of his boots. "Operation what now?" "They appear to have contingency plans for this exact scenario, sir. Very detailed contingency plans, with names like Star Killer Protocol and Complete System Sterilization." Chixilo's scales had now achieved a shade of green that didn't exist in nature. "Sir, I don't think we killed a primitive mining colony. I think we killed members of an apex predator species that has been preparing for someone to do exactly what we did." The Supreme Admiral began pacing back and forth across his quarters, his forearms gesticulating wildly. "This is impossible. Our intelligence reports clearly indicated that humans are a young, primitive species with limited technological capabilities." "Sir, with respect, our intelligence gathering on humans consisted of 1 long-range scan and a xenobiology report that was mostly speculation." Kixilo hesitated, then pressed on. "The xenobiology department did note that humans evolved as persistence hunters, who specialized in tracking down and eliminating threats to their pack. They also noted that humans are one of the few species that practices warfare as a form of art." "Art?" Vextar's laugh had a distinctly hysterical edge. "Lieutenant, war is about efficiency, not art. That's what makes them terrifying, sir. They don't wage war for conquest or resources. They wage war to make a point. And apparently their point involves doing things to star systems that stars weren't designed to survive." Another alarm began blaring, adding to the growing cacophony of impending doom that was rapidly becoming the soundtrack to Vextar's day. "Sir, incoming priority message from the human fleet," announced the communications officer over the intercom. "They're requesting to speak with whoever authorized the attack on their colony." Vextar straightened his uniform and tried to salvage what remained of his dignity. "Put them through. Perhaps we can negotiate a reasonable settlement to this misunderstanding." The holographic display flickered and resolved into the image of a human female wearing what appeared to be a military uniform. She had short dark hair, calm eyes, and the kind of smile that suggested she was about to deliver very bad news with exceptional politeness. "Supreme Admiral Vextar, I presume? I'm Fleet Admiral Rosa Park of the Earth Defense Force. I understand you recently conducted what you called a pest control operation on one of our colonies?" "Admiral Park," Vextar began, switching to his most diplomatic tone, "I believe there may have been some miscommunication. The Zeridian Empire is prepared to offer compensation for any inconvenience caused by this regrettable incident." Park's smile didn't waver, which somehow made it infinitely more terrifying. "Oh, Admiral, there's been no miscommunication at all. You killed 53,417 human beings, including children, including families having reunions. You vaporized them from orbit because you thought we were pests. Admiral, surely we can reach some kind of diplomatic solution." "I'm afraid not, Admiral. You see, humans have a very simple policy regarding species that commit genocide against us. We don't negotiate. We don't accept apologies. We provide educational demonstrations on the consequences of poor decision-making. Your demonstration is scheduled to begin in approximately 2 hours." Vextar felt his confidence crumbling like a sandcastle in a tsunami. "What kind of demonstration?" "The kind that can be seen from the next galaxy, Admiral. We're going to turn your star into a supernova. Your entire system will be reduced to expanding plasma and cosmic radiation. Every ship, every station, every planet, every moon. Complete and total sterilization." "You can't do that!" Vextar's voice rose to a near shriek. "That's impossible. Stars don't just go supernova on command." Park's expression never changed. "Admiral, 40 years ago, humans asked ourselves a very important question. What would we do if someone tried to wipe us out? The answer was simple. We'd wipe them out first. and we do it so thoroughly that every other species in the galaxy would think twice before picking a fight with us. But that's monstrous. You're talking about committing genocide on a galactic scale. No, Admiral. Genocide is what you did to our colony. What we're about to do is pest control. The irony should not be lost on you. The transmission ended, leaving Vexstar staring at empty space, while the bridge crew frantically tried to calculate escape routes that didn't exist. Sir, Keekslow said quietly, I really think we should have done more research on humans before we decided to kill them. Chief Engineer Tommy Boom Boom Rodriguez stood in front of the HMS Overkill's primary engineering console, cracking his knuckles like a pianist preparing for a particularly challenging concerto. The device before him looked deceptively simple, a collection of screens, switches, and one very important red button that was labeled, with typical human understatement, Solar Restructuring Protocol. Admiral Park, Rodriguez called over the comm system, his Brooklyn accent somehow making the impending destruction of an entire star system sound like a routine maintenance procedure. We're in position and ready to rock and roll. Starkiller device is fully charged and locked onto the Zeridian primary. All safety protocols have been disabled as requested. Park's voice came back crisp and professional. Excellent, Chief. Are we broadcasting this demonstration to the galactic community as planned? You bet, Admiral. We've got feeds going out to every major species in this sector. Educational programming at its finest. I figure if we're going to make an example, might as well make sure everyone gets a good look at the textbook. On 17 different worlds, in 43 different languages, emergency broadcasts had interrupted regular programming with a simple message. The Human Defense Force presents a practical demonstration of consequences. Today's lesson: what happens when you commit genocide against humans? The Galactic Council's emergency session had devolved into what could charitably be described as controlled panic. The Altarian ambassador was hyperventilating into a breathing apparatus. The Centauri representative had passed out entirely. Only the Vikan delegation seemed calm, but they'd been dealing with humans for decades, and had learned to simply accept that sometimes entire star systems just stopped existing when humans got annoyed. Chief Rodriguez, came another voice over the comm. This is Dr. Vasquez from Research and Development. Could you describe the process for our viewing audience? For educational purposes, of course. Sure thing, Doc, Rodriguez replied, settling into his engineer's chair with obvious enthusiasm. So, what we've got here is your basic stellar manipulation device. Nothing too fancy, really. We just override the star's natural fusion process and convince it to burn through about 10 million years of fuel in approximately 30 seconds. He gestured to the main display, which showed the Zeridian star in perfect detail. It was a beautiful yellow dwarf, roughly the same size as Earth's sun, currently providing light and warmth to 6 inhabited planets and over 40 billion Zeridians. Now the trick is getting the reactions started uniformly throughout the star's core. You can't just poke it in one spot and hope for the best. You gotta be precise, surgical even. We use a combination of gravitational manipulation and what we call aggressive nuclear encouragement to destabilize the entire stellar mass at once. On the bridge of the Zeridian flagship, Supreme Admiral Vexstar watched this casual discussion of stellar murder with the kind of fascination usually reserved for watching one's own execution. They're talking about destroying our sun, he whispered to Lieutenant Chicxulub, like they're explaining how to change a tire. Sir, Kazilo replied, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't think they see it as destruction. I think they see it as maintenance, like they're cleaning up a mess. Rodriguez continued his impromptu physics lesson with obvious enjoyment. The beauty of this system is that it's completely controlled. We're not just blowing up the star randomly. That would be wasteful and unprofessional. Instead, we're creating what you might call a directed supernova. All the energy gets focused into a nice, neat, expanding sphere that'll sterilize the entire system without affecting neighboring star systems. How considerate of them, the Altarian ambassador managed to gasp from his emergency breathing apparatus. Now the whole process takes about 45 seconds from initiation to completion, Rodriguez explained, running through his pre-firing checklist with the same methodical precision a pilot might use for takeoff procedures. First, we destabilize the core. Then we watch the chain reaction propagate outward through the star's mass. Finally, we get to enjoy the light show as 40 billion years of stellar evolution gets compressed into less than a minute. He paused to check a reading on his console. Oh, and for those keeping track at home, the energy release will be approximately 10 to the 44th joules. That's about the same as our sun will produce over its entire 10 billion year lifespan, all released at once. Pretty neat, huh? Admiral Park's voice came over the comm again. Chief, are you ready to begin the demonstration? Just waiting for your word, Admiral. All systems are green across the board. Supreme Admiral Vexstar, Park's voice suddenly addressed the Zeridian fleet directly. This is your final opportunity to appreciate the irony of your situation. You destroyed our colony because you thought we were primitive pests. In about 30 seconds, your entire civilization is going to be reduced to expanding plasma because we think you're primitive pests. The difference is, we actually have the technology to back up our pest control methods. On his flagship's bridge, Vexstar made one last desperate attempt at negotiation. Admiral Park, surely there must be some way to resolve this diplomatically. The Zeridian Empire has vast resources. We could offer reparations, technology transfers, territorial concessions. Admiral, Park interrupted, her voice carrying the kind of patience usually reserved for explaining basic concepts to small children. You had 53,417 opportunities to consider diplomatic solutions. That was the number of humans you vaporized. Now it's time for you to learn what humans consider an appropriate response to genocide. Rodriguez cracked his knuckles one final time. Admiral, we're go for stellar restructuring on your command. Proceed, Chief. Let's show the galaxy what happens when you pick a fight with humanity. Roger that. Initiating solar restructuring protocol in 3, 2, 1. Rodriguez pressed the red button with the casual ease of someone turning on a coffee maker. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The Zeridian star continued to burn, with the same steady radiance it had maintained for 4.5 billion years. Then, deep in the star's core, exotic particles began their work. Gravitational fields that had no business existing outside of black holes started compressing matter beyond the normal limits of stellar physics. Nuclear reactions that typically took millions of years began completing in microseconds. Ooh, there we go, Rodriguez said with obvious satisfaction as his instruments registered the beginning of the cascade. Core destabilization is proceeding right on schedule. The star's about to have what you might call an extremely bad day. The first visible sign was a subtle brightening, as if someone had adjusted the star's dimmer switch. Then the brightening became more pronounced. Then it became blindingly obvious that something very wrong was happening to the Zeridian sun. Structural collapse is beginning, Rodriguez narrated cheerfully. The star's outer layers are falling inward, while the core reactions are accelerating exponentially. In about 15 seconds, all that infalling matter is going to hit the hyperactive core and, well, let's just say the results are going to be visible from the next galaxy over. The star began to pulse, its surface roiling with convulsions that dwarfed anything in recorded astronomical history. Massive solar flares erupted in all directions, each one carrying more energy than most civilizations used in a century. 10 seconds to full cascade, Rodriguez announced. I gotta say, this never gets old. There's something deeply satisfying about convincing a star to rearrange itself on command. Supreme Admiral Vexstar watched his species' sun begin its death throes and finally understood what the humans had been trying to tell him. This wasn't war, this wasn't conquest, this wasn't even revenge. This was a science demonstration. 5 seconds, Rodriguez called out. 4, 3, 2, 1, and we have ignition. The Zeridian star exploded. 6 months later, Director Marcus Stone sat in what used to be called the Galactic Council chambers, and was now more accurately described as the place where everyone comes to make sure they haven't accidentally annoyed the humans. The architecture hadn't changed, but the atmosphere was distinctly different. Where once there had been the confident chatter of species discussing trade routes and territorial disputes, now there was the hushed reverence usually reserved for religious services or funeral parlors. Stone was reviewing a tablet containing trade proposals while sipping his coffee, the same blend he'd been drinking the morning the Zeridians had made their fatally poor decision. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was now negotiating shipping agreements on the same day of the week that had once been reserved for authorizing the complete annihilation of entire star systems. Director Stone, announced the Altarian ambassador, his breathing apparatus making soft whirring sounds that suggested he was still working through some lingering anxiety issues. The Centauri delegation would like to discuss the possibility of establishing a joint mining operation in the former Zeridian sector. Stone looked up from his tablet with the same mild interest he might show when asked about the weather. The former Zeridian sector is currently a C2 expanding sphere of superheated plasma, traveling at approximately 10% the speed of light. I'm not sure it's quite ready for mining operations yet. Ah, yes, right. The ambassador's scales shifted to an embarrassed shade of blue. Perhaps we could discuss future mining rights? Say, in a few thousand years when the debris field has cooled sufficiently? That seems reasonable, Stone replied, making a note on his tablet. We'll add it to the long-term development schedule, right after the Rigelian Asteroid Belt Reclamation Project and the Vigan Nebula Terraforming Initiative. At the far end of the chamber, a delegation of species that had never heard of humans 6 months ago was huddled around what appeared to be an educational display titled, "How Not to Commit Genocide, a Practical Guide to Avoiding Stellar Restructuring." Stone had to admit that Dr. Vasquez's public education campaign was remarkably effective. "Director Stone," came another voice, this one belonging to the Procyon trade representative, "my government would like to discuss the possibility of purchasing some of your defensive technologies. Purely for deterrent purposes, you understand?" Stone's smile was the kind that made insurance actuaries nervous. "I'm afraid our stellar manipulation technology is not for sale. It falls under what we call the "don't give apocalypse weapons to people who might use them" clause of our technology transfer agreement. But surely, for an ally. "The Procyonians are indeed valued allies," Stone interrupted gently, "which is exactly why we're not going to sell you weapons that could accidentally destroy star systems. We've found that the best way to maintain good relationships is to avoid giving our friends the tools to end civilization by mistake." The Procyonian representative's expression suggested he was working through the logic of this statement and finding it both perfectly reasonable and deeply frustrating. From across the chamber, Stone heard a familiar, cheerful voice and turned to see Dr. Luna Vasquez explaining the finer points of human military doctrine to a group of fascinated xenobiologists. "You see," Luna was saying with obvious enthusiasm, "humans don't actually enjoy warfare. We're quite fond of peace, actually. Excellent for trade, scientific advancement, cultural exchange, all sorts of pleasant activities. But we've learned that the most effective way to maintain peace is to make absolutely certain that everyone understands the consequences of disrupting it." One of the xenobiologists, a nervous-looking creature that resembled a cross between a praying mantis and a filing cabinet, raised what might have been a hand. "Dr. Vasquez, what would humans consider an appropriate response to, say, accidentally destroying one of your cargo vessels?" "Oh, that's easy," Luna replied brightly. "Accidents happen. You apologize, you pay compensation, you implement better safety protocols, everyone moves on with their lives. We only break out the star killers for intentional acts of genocide." "And what constitutes genocide in human terms?" "Well, killing humans because you think we're inferior certainly qualifies. The Zeridians made it very clear that they considered us pests that needed extermination. That kind of thinking tends to spread if you don't address it promptly and definitively." Stone turned his attention back to his trade agreements, but kept half an ear on Luna's impromptu lecture. She had a gift for making humanity's more extreme defensive measures sound like reasonable responses to workplace safety violations. "Director Stone," announced yet another ambassador, this one from a species he didn't immediately recognize, "the Andromedan Collective would like to formally apologize for any statements made by our representatives regarding human intelligence over the past several decades. We were uninformed." "No apology necessary," Stone replied without looking up from his tablet. "Honest mistakes, based on incomplete information, are perfectly understandable. It's the deliberate acts of species-wide extermination that we find objectionable." "Yes, right. We've made note of that in our diplomatic protocols." Stone finished reviewing a particularly complex shipping agreement and set his tablet aside. It was time for the main event. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted non-binary entities, if I could have your attention for a moment, I'd like to address a question that's been coming up in several of our negotiations." The chamber fell silent with the kind of immediate attention usually reserved for emergency broadcasts or impending natural disasters. "Several species have asked about humanity's current defensive capabilities and our willingness to use them in the future. I think it's important to be transparent about these matters." Stone stood up slowly, his movements deliberate and measured. "The device that was used to restructure the Zeridian star was not our most powerful weapon. It was simply the most appropriate one for the situation." A collective intake of breath swept through the chamber like wind through a forest. "We currently maintain 47 similar devices in our defensive arsenal, each one capable of turning any star in this galaxy into a supernova on approximately 15 minutes' notice. This is not a threat, you understand. This is simply information that we feel our galactic neighbors should have when making foreign policy decisions." The silence that followed was so complete that Stone could hear the soft hum of the chamber's air recycling system. "Now then," he continued, settling back into his chair and picking up his coffee, Does anyone else have questions about trade agreements? I'm particularly interested in the Rigelian proposal for expanding the shipping lanes through the former Centauri neutral zone. The rest of the session proceeded with the kind of polite efficiency that characterized most human interactions. Trade routes were negotiated, territorial boundaries were respectfully acknowledged, and technology transfer agreements were signed with careful attention to the "don't give apocalypse weapons to people who might use them" clause. As the various delegations filed out of the chamber, chatting quietly among themselves about cargo tonnage and shipping schedules, Stone reflected on how much the galaxy had improved over the past 6 months. Territorial disputes were being resolved through negotiation rather than warfare. Trade was flourishing. Scientific cooperation was at an all-time high. And nobody, absolutely nobody, was talking about committing genocide against anyone else. Marcus. Dr. Vasquez appeared at his elbow with her usual cheerful energy. I have to say, this whole peace through superior firepower approach is working out remarkably well. Galactic civilization has never been more civilized. Stone nodded, finishing the last of his coffee. It's amazing what people can accomplish when they're not worried about someone randomly deciding to exterminate their entire species. Who would have thought that the key to galactic peace was simply making sure everyone understood the consequences of breaking it? The Zeridians certainly learned their lesson, Luna observed. Well, they would have, if any of them had survived the learning experience. That's the beauty of the demonstration model of education, Stone replied, standing up and gathering his materials. Sometimes the most effective way to teach a lesson is to make sure everyone else gets to watch what happens when someone doesn't do their homework. As they walked out of the chamber together, Stone couldn't help but smile. 6 months ago, the galaxy had been a chaotic mess of territorial disputes, trade wars, and casual genocide. Now it was a well-organized community of species that treated each other with respect, conducted business fairly, and went out of their way to avoid accidentally annoying the humans. All it had taken was one simple demonstration of what happened when someone decided to pick a fight with humanity. The lesson, it seemed, had been received loud and clear. After all, nobody wanted to be the species that required a second demonstration.